Hey there Westerosi, and welcome back to Mike Meeple's Painting Poorly miniature painting tutorials for A Song of Ice and Fire the Miniatures game by CMON Games. Today we look to the sky as dragons descend upon Westeros, and we work on Viserion, Rhaegal, and Big Bad Brother Drogon from the Mother of Dragons expansion. While the novels describe their colors in fair detail, I'll be utilizing metallic paints to give their scales an iridescent look on the battlefield. And I'll be going over how to paint each model individually, so you can really get a good idea of what I'm doing. But before I do that, I'm going to start off by applying a zenithal highlight to all three of the models. If you're unsure how to do this, please make sure to check out my how-to series of tutorials, where I go over this exact technique. Once that's dry, we're going to start working on Viserion. Since we're using pretty much all metallic paint today, I'll be thinning them with Lamian Medium by Citadel, as I feel it just works better to thin metallic paint than water. The first thing we'll do is use some Retributor armor by Citadel to paint Viserion's body. Do your best to leave the outward-facing wings unpainted, along with the spikes along his back and the inside of his mouth. When that's dry, we're going to apply a wash of light tone by the Army Painter to everything that you've already painted. After that dries, I'm going to use Sigmarite by Citadel and dry brush over everything we've just done. With all that done, we're finished with Viserion's body, and we'll be moving on to his wings with Liberator Gold by Citadel. You'll also use this color to paint the spikes down his back and the horns coming from his head. After that, take some Brown Rose by Vallejo and paint the inside of Viserion's mouth. Next, take some Ivory by Vallejo and paint his teeth and claws. Then I'm going to use Demonic Yellow by the Army Painter to paint the eyes. And some Neutral Gray by Vallejo to paint the rock, though you can use whatever color you like. Moving on to shades, I'll be applying some Flesh Wash by the Army Painter to the inside of Viserion's mouth, before applying light tone again, only this time on his wings and spikes. After that, use some Nuln Oil by Citadel and apply some to the rock. Moving on to Viserion's highlights, we'll start off with Liberator Gold and highlight the wings. You want to paint the portions of the wings that fold outward, along with the fronts of the spikes along the back and the horns on his head. To add additional highlights, we're going to be adding some silver by Vallejo to the Liberator Gold, adding additional drops of silver for each additional highlight. When adding additional highlights, remember to paint a smaller portion of what you've previously highlighted, and use your brightest highlight to add some detail to the veins and the wings. Next, take some Sky Gray by Vallejo and do a quick dry brush on the rock. Before you use some ivory to highlight the claws and teeth. After that, use some brown rose to highlight Viserion's tongue, and finish off by using some black to make a vertical reptilian pupil down each eye. Time to move on to Rhaegal. I'm starting off by painting Rhaegal's body with metallic green from Vallejo's Mecha Color series. While I'm using my airbrush to apply this to Rhaegal, a standard paintbrush would work just as well. Next, I'll be using green tone by the Army Painter and applying that wash to his body. When it dries, I'll be doing a light dry brush with the metallic green over the more prominent parts of the model, like the head and shoulders. In order to add a little more color variation to Rhaegal, I'll be mixing together equal parts metallic green and Liberator Gold, and using that to paint the wings and Rhaegal's belly. Next, we'll take some copper by Vallejo and paint the spikes running down his back and all the horns coming out of his head. Paint the inside of his mouth and tongue using brown rose like we did with his little brother, before taking some German Gray by Vallejo to paint his black teeth and claws. Carefully add a bit of Vallejo's bright orange for his eyes. And I use some Flat Earth by Vallejo to paint the rock, though once again, feel free to paint it whatever color you like. Once it's all dry, apply some green tone to the wings and belly, some flesh wash to the mouth and tongue, and some Nuln Oil to the rocks and the copper spikes and horns. When that's all dry, we'll add highlights to the wings and belly with the same mix of metallic green and Liberator Gold, adding in more and more Liberator Gold with every level of highlight that you paint. For the small details like the holes in the wings, you'll want to use your brightest highlight and only paint the bottom edge of the hole so it looks like it's catching the light from above. Next, highlight the spikes and horns with some copper. Before adding in some silver for additional levels of highlights. Then highlight the tongue with brown rose. And the nails and teeth with neutral gray. Finish off with a dry brush of cork brown by Vallejo all over the rock. And again, using some black to draw a vertical pupil down his eyes. When you're all done with that, it's time to move on to Big Brother Drogon. For Drogon, we're going to start off with some gunmetal gray by Vallejo and using that to paint the body. Next, we'll take some metallic red by Vallejo's Mecha Color series to paint the belly and the wings. You'll also use this color to paint the spikes on his back and the horns coming from his head. Use brown rose to paint Drogon's mouth. And some sky gray to paint the rock, though I just chose the colors for each rock based on what I felt would be the best contrast between each dragon and their respective rocks. I used some neutral gray to paint the claws and teeth, along with some dark vermilion by Vallejo to paint the eyes. Once that's all dry, use some flesh wash to shade the mouth, and apply a wash of Nuln Oil over everything else. This helps deepen Drogon's look to give him that nice black color, and it brings out the details in the wings, such as the leathery cracks near the hands. Don't be afraid to add additional coats of Nuln Oil to the leather cracks and the wings to make sure they really pop. When that's all dry, use your metallic red to apply highlights to the scales on the belly, the horns, spikes on his back, and the wings. For the leather cracks, just apply an edge highlight to the top of each little shape of wing, making sure not to paint over the cracks themselves, leaving them as dark as possible. You can add additional levels of highlights by mixing some Retributor armor with the metallic red, and using more and more Retributor armor with each additional level of highlight. Then highlight the tongue and mouth with some brown rose, and dry brush some white over the rock to make it pop. Use some sky gray to highlight the claws and teeth before you make a vertical pupil with some black. Now that all the dragons are painted up, you can finish up by painting the rim of the base, before adding some texture with Vallejo brown earth gel, and finishing up painting and gluing down the scenery just like in my previous tutorials. And that's it! I want to give a big shout out to all of my patrons whose generous support helped me make quality content like this. And if you're interested in becoming a patron yourself, information on how to do so can be found in the description for this video, along with links to all the supplies I used today and a link to my blog, where you'll find more tutorials for games like A Song of Ice and Fire. And if you like this video and would like to see more, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, Westerosi,